Good morning and welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We are delighted to have you here, both those in this space and those attending virtually. It is good to be together, a community of youth, adults, and children, sharing the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. I'm Jenna Borgmeyer, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of our board of directors. If you have a joy or sorrow you would like shared in the meditation, please add it to the meditation bowl or in the chat box before the opening hymn. Please make sure to gain consent before you put someone's full name in the bowl. If you are accompanied by children today, we warmly welcome your whole family. We invite you to explore our Soulwork Center by the meditation bowl, where you can explore different activities designed to help all ages actively engage with today's worship service. We offer a special welcome to newcomers today. We invite you to fill out a guest card at the Welcome Center or in the chat box. Cyber Social Hour starts 5 minutes after the postlude. Feel free to also join in one of our conversation circles in the social hall for a short, structured time of connection and community. Coffee and tea are included. As part of their North American tour, we welcome our special musical guests, the OK Factor and Yarv. Did I get that right? Yep. Yarv and the OK Factor will be selling merch in the atrium between and after services, including the OK Factor's brand new album, OKX, available for the first time in Minnesota, featuring 2 tunes with Yarv, and Yarv's brand new album, A Swedish Mile, available for the first time in Minnesota, featuring 1 tune with OK Factor. You can find out about these and other opportunities for involvement in our weekly e-news, in the atrium after the service, or in the digital atrium found on our website at wbuuc.org/atrium. A representative from the lead minister search committee has an announcement now.
Good morning. My name is Molly Ryan, and my pronouns are she, her. As of this morning, we have 219 completed surveys and 97 people signed up for cottage meetings. It's great. Thank you all so much. If you haven't yet, please go to wbuuc.org/transition and take the survey. It's short, it only takes about 15 minutes, and then sign up for a cottage meeting. We still especially need to hear from youth, those between the ages of 18 and 30, and families with young children, and also new members. The survey is short, and cottage meetings are so important. Please stop by the table in the atrium if you have any questions between services. Thank you.
Welcome to our church, where together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place.
Good morning. My name is Kathy McComber, and I use the she, her pronouns. I'm a list maker. I make lists, timelines, and plans. I think through options and possible outcomes, and I make the best choices I can based on imperfect information. Our theme this month is courage, putting something into action. We often think of courageous acts as being sweeping and decisive. Many actually are a series of incremental acts. Years ago, I was struggling in a troubled marriage. I had made lists and options for myself. I drew boundaries. I worked through the list and the timeline. My greatest fear was that my 4 sons, growing up in this very dysfunctional family, would model the behaviors they experienced and observed. After I'd worked through the options to try and save the marriage, I filed for divorce. I knew this would hurt my children, my family, my ex-husband, and myself. I did not have a financial safety net. I didn't have a living wage job nor a college degree. I borrowed money for a car to go to college. I worked days and went to school nights. I moved my boys from their home in the country to a trailer in town where the police chief could keep an eye on them while I attended college at night. In retrospect, these choices were courageous and correct, but that was not at all clear at the time. Eventually, I graduated and was successful in satisfying and sustainable work. This little sign was at my desk throughout. It says, "Leap and the net will appear." On its face, not really good advice. We look at the sign, but we would really like to see the net before we leap. As I reflected on each decision point following my divorce, I could look at that sign and say, yes, the net did appear. Today, let's light the chalice for making reasoned decisions with imperfect information and knowing the net will appear.
I'm Reverend Roger, and my pronouns are he, him. I invite you to join in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our opening hymn today is number 85, Although This Life Is But a Wraith. You can find that in the gray hymnal, the larger hymnal. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit wherever you are and join in singing hymn 85.
Oh Good morning. My name is Amy and my pronouns are she, her. And this morning's story is called Henry David Thoreau and the Still Small Voice. And during this morning's story, he imagines where to find the still small voice. So I'm going to invite all of us to take a breath, to find comfort in this place as we listen for the still small voice. Henry sat in front of his little cabin on one of his 3 chairs, listening to the evening. If you were there, you might have thought there was nothing to listen to, no one to talk with. Mr. Emerson's house, the closest person he had to a next-door neighbor, was over a mile away. Even the natural world was still. No wind rippled the pond, and the birds had stopped singing as the still night approached. Still, Henry listened for the tiniest sounds: a small fish breaking the surface of the water and splashing back down again, the crackle of leaves as a mouse passed by, the sound of wings as the crow passed overhead. To him, these miniature sounds were music. Of course, most of the townspeople wondered why Henry David Thoreau decided to build a tiny cabin from used materials out in Emerson's Wood by Walden Pond. Why would a promising writer want to move away from society to sit with birds and bugs for company? In fact, Henry enjoyed the company of Emerson and the other thinkers who shared in his love and wonder of nature. To him, the quiet of the pond and the animals and the plants that lived in and around it provided excellent company. Sometimes, Henry thought, the conversation you learn the most from is the one in which the least is said. As he watched the last rays of light glisten on the pond, Henry thought about the biblical story about the prophet Elijah, who went to a mountain cave to listen for what God wanted him to do. While Elijah stood outside this cave, a great wind whipped around the mountains, sending boulders crashing to the ground in the fury of its passing. But Elijah didn't find God or any answers in the wind. Then an earthquake rattled the mountain with a terrific rumbling, but Elijah didn't find any answers or the still small voice in the earthquake. Then came a fire sweeping across the rocks and brush outside the cave, red and roaring and grand, but Elijah didn't find answers in the fire either. Finally, after all the roaring and crashing, everything became still and quiet, and Elijah stood there shaking, wrapped in his cloak, just waiting. And out of the silence came a still, small voice. And it was then that Elijah found God and answers about what he should do. The wind picked up as Henry sat outside in the cooling night air. As he turned to face the wind, he heard it whistling in both ears, and he felt at peace. I hear a still small voice when I hear the jumping fish and the rustling leaves, and sometimes I hear it in the pond, and even as the stars begin to peek through the trees on a clear night. Sometimes I hear it when my heart is still and I can listen deep within, and sometimes even in storms that shake the ground too. The still small voice guides me when I remember to listen. It reminds me that I'm connected to all that lives and breathes, to all that exists. It grounds me and guides me when I'm not sure what to do next, and then I feel at peace.
We gather together as a community, around 65, 70 people in this room, and 39 households beyond. Wherever you are, I invite you to picture in your mind and heart a place in your life where you have heard a still small voice, a place where you feel at home in your soul and in the world, a place where you can hear a voice that guides you and reminds you that you are connected to all lives. Perhaps it is in this place that you are now. Perhaps for those in this room here, looking out, perfectly still, like that evening Thoreau wrote about. Perhaps it is somewhere else. Wherever it is, situate yourself in that place, either literally or in your imagination. And let's share a few moments of quiet as we breathe in and out. In and out. In and out. In this centered place of quiet, I invite you now to hold all those who are in need of compassion and prayer. People you know and people you don't know. Perhaps it is you who are in need of prayer and compassion this morning. If so, hold yourself lovingly. This morning, let's hold those who are struggling, especially people struggling with mental and physical health challenges, addiction, challenging relationships, loneliness, disconnection, despair. Let us be mindful of those who are living in the midst of or trying to flee war and oppression and poverty. May we find a tender place in our hearts for all who are suffering, near and far. And I invite you to take a quick inventory of things big, more likely small, maybe really small, that feel like blessings today. And cultivate a moment of gratitude and joy to make room in your heart for those things too. In our White Bear UU community today, we celebrate with Mara Coyle and Joel Headland the birth of grandchild Phoebe Jo Headland. Phoebe and parents Darla and Leo are doing well. Congratulations to all. We also lift up in our hearts within our community today a loved one as they work to overcome addiction and rebuild a family. For a brother diagnosed with brain cancer. For a dear friend who is grieving the loss of 2 family members. And for Christopher, who was recently diagnosed with Parkinson's. And finally now, in this space, wherever we are, I invite you to say aloud or in your hearts the name or names of particular people you're holding in your heart today. Amen.
All funds donated in today's special collection will go to Dream of Wild Health, one of Minnesota's longest-serving Native-led nonprofits. Its mission is to restore health and well-being in the Native community by recovering knowledge of and access to Indigenous foods, medicines, and lifeways. Dream of Wild Health has expanded its food production and nutrition outreach for the community, connecting urban Native youth to the land through a series of summer camps at their farm in Hugo, Minnesota. They learn from elders and Native artists who share their ancestral knowledge about the natural world and traditional practices that have survived for generations. We will pass the donation plates now. You can also donate in 3 other ways. On the WUUC webpage, sending a check or leaving a check in the locked box outside the front office, or use the text to give option found in your order of service or in the chat box. Whichever way you give, please indicate the keyword dream. Thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we live together.
As Unitarian Universalists, we draw wisdom from many different sources, including the stories of our faith ancestors. Our second story is a story about a Unitarian or a Universalist preacher named John Murray, hardship, an unexpected friend, and finding your way. John was born and raised in England and Ireland and grew up to be a great public speaker and preacher. John was always curious about new ideas and was eager to learn about new things. One of the new ideas that John and his wife Eliza learned about was an idea called Universalism. This was the idea that all people were beloved of God. And the more they learned of Universalism, the more John went out to preach this gospel of love. But things quickly changed for John when he was driven away from his church by people who did not agree with this message. He eventually became indebted and was arrested, and then unexpectedly lost his infant son and wife to illness.
John was so sad. He was angry. He was devastated. He didn't know what to do with his broken heart. He was so sad that he wasn't even sure what he believed anymore. So he decided he would never preach again. And while John's closest friends begged him to continue preaching, John instead decided that it was time, that what he wanted was a life of solitude that he heard he could find across the ocean. And so he boarded a ship called the Hand in Hand, bound for New York. Yet again, John faced the unexpected when the ship landed far from its intended destination of New York and became stranded in a sandbar outside of a small town called Good Luck, New Jersey. The crew knew that they would be stranded until the wind changed again, for ships in that time depended on the wind to sail. And so, not knowing how long it would be that they would be stranded, John was charged to go ashore to look for food and supplies for him and the crew.
Soon, John came across a farm not far offshore, and there he was greeted by a farmer named Thomas Potter. Thomas welcomed John with open arms, saying that he had been waiting for him. He provided John with enough food and everyone on the Hand in Hand. And as Thomas Potter learned more about John Murray and the journey that led him to the shores outside of Good Luck, the more Thomas was convinced that John really was the person that he had been waiting for. You see, Thomas himself had heard the message of universalism many years before and was so convinced that the world needed to hear the loving message that he built a small chapel on his farm with the hopes that one day a universalist preacher might come to fill it. But for 10 long years, the pulpit sat empty, even while Thomas Potter had sought preachers.
So, as you can imagine, while John Murray felt stranded by the wind, Thomas Potter believed that the wind had brought him a wonderful gift, the preacher he had been looking for. And so he begged John Murray to stay. Murray remained unsure. He had, vowed to never preach again and was eager to begin his new life of solitude in New York. Though he was a gifted preacher, he wasn't really looking for a new pulpit or a new congregation or even a new friend. But after much convincing, Thomas Potter was able to get the reluctant John Murray to make a deal. If the wind hadn't changed by the following Sunday, John Murray agreed that he would preach. And what do you think happened?
Well, the wind did not change, and on that Sunday on September 30th, 1770, John Murray preached his first sermon in America in the small chapel that Thomas Potter built. The wind changed soon after, and John Murray boarded the ship and sailed on to New York. John came back not long after to visit his new unexpected friend and to preach again and again in Thomas Potter's chapel. In fact, John Murray began preaching all over the East Coast and established the first Universalist church in Massachusetts, bringing his message of love wherever he went.
Forgive me, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I am Reverend Sarah Goodman. I use she, her pronouns. In 1770, John Murray was living his life when his wife and young child, as well as 4 siblings, died of illness. His belief in universal salvation made him an outcast in his Methodist faith, and he felt that his life was over. He was 29 years old. He vowed to never preach again and decided to take himself off to American colonies to lose himself in a new world. But he didn't lose himself. He found a new self. In a way, he was rescued from himself by an unfavorable wind, a stranded ship, and a farmer named Thomas Potter. Although it took little courage for Murray to leave England, it took a lot of courage for him to stay at Potter's farm. It took courage to believe this stranger, that his preaching this new thing was welcome in this new place. In contrast, Henry David Thoreau didn't have a specific traumatic moment that led him to leave his ordinary life. He was unmoored, a transitory kind of person with no specific calling. Thoreau was likely someone who complained to his friends about his discontent, because it seems he complained enough that his best friend Ellery said, "There's nothing to be done with you but to go out into the woods and live in a cabin." So he did. When Thoreau moved to the woods on Walden Pond, he said that it was so he could live deliberately and to separate himself from a society so that he could hear beyond the noise, so he could hear the still small voice that helped him understand himself and the world. He was searching for something, for meaning, for simplicity that could somehow solve his problems. He was looking for a way forward. When, how, and why do we make big changes in our lives? Where do you find the courage to make your life different? Sometimes it's really clear that it's time to do something different. Your life falls apart, there's a catastrophe, or you're forced to change because of other people's decisions. But there are other times when change calls us from complacency into courageousness, when there's a sense of unease pulling you towards something different, something unknown, but hopeful. Have you ever felt that there's something not quite right in your life, but when you consider making a change, it's scary and unappealing and just not the right thing to do yet? How do we discern a path forward when it just isn't clear? Maybe we let go of expectations and embrace the words of Karen Herring in her new book, Trusting Change. The world is meant to change and grow and move. We are being asked to change too, to grow and move with it, listening, learning, living by adapting. Not just being, but also always becoming who we are called to be. And we're always called to be something more than we are today. There isn't a time at any point in the future when I will be done, when I will finally be who I am without being called to be more, not until the end. When I gave up theater as a profession, I turned my attention towards finding something else, something meaningful. It took quite a while to find that meaningful thing. In the meantime, I worked for more than 4 years at the Automobile Club of Southern California, AAA, or the club. I knew from the beginning that this was a temporary thing, a stopover from a dream on the way to a stable, solid life, saving the world. That was important. I needed to save the world. Okay, this job treated me well. They trained me as a DMV employee, a call center specialist, a receptionist, a domestic travel agent, an international travel agent, and a notary. And they also stuck my photo on the cover of the new employee training manual. Working for AAA was the least terrible corporate job, the least terrible customer service job ever. Some of my coworkers were celebrating their 10th or 15th anniversary at this job that they started, thinking it would be a stepping stone to somewhere else. I could have done the same. I could have fallen into the rhythm of things, and before I knew it, 10 years would have flashed by. Actually, it would have been 15 at this point. I'm telling you, time, it is weird. It feels like yesterday. I could have stayed with it if it weren't for the mind-numbing boredom and the impossibility of being my true self. I wanted to make people's lives better, and I realized that working this customer-facing job that I couldn't even answer questions about myself honestly. I had to smile and nod when the person in front of me went on a long diatribe about something that I cared about. I was being called to live an authentic life. As Parker Palmer calls it, an undivided life, one where who I am and who I am called to be aren't continents apart. It's a true privilege, an absolute undeserved gift that I was in a position to make that kind of life happen for myself while making a living. I consider the millions of BIPOC people who have no chance of that, who need to code switch and mask their true selves so that they are more likely to be treated with respect while working, while driving, while living. I think of the 1,000 tiny cuts that sting, the microaggressions that can bleed a person so dry that folks with marginalized identities live with every single day, their whole lives. I think of the saying that Sunday morning is the most segregated time in our country, and I know that it's not because we're keeping folks out. It's not only that, it's a little bit that. But it's not only that. It's that people who spend their lives, their work lives, their other parts of their lives pretending to be someone else, they get to choose to be in religious communities where they can shake off those expectations for a while. They can spend a few hours somewhere they can live into their authentic selves. I think again how privileged I have been to be able to leave a job with security and benefits that paid well and had good values. How privileged I have been to apply to and get access to a premier seminary to study theology. How privileged I have been to have the resources to move my family across the country to pursue that education, to pursue this career. How privileged I have been. And still, I had to make a challenging decision. Should I stay in a comfortable job that keeps me fed but doesn't fill me up? Or should I leave my safety net, my community, my home, to find something that could be better? It took me 4 years to find the courage to make that change, but I'm glad that I did. In our chalice lighting, Kathy spoke very candidly about the decision she had to make to leave a marriage that wasn't giving her life and the sacrifices she had to make to support her family. She found the courage to do some hard things because she knew she couldn't keep going, doing what she was doing. She had to leap and know that the net would appear. She's glad that she did. Like Murray, we make courageous leaps in our lives when change happens within us, when we need to make decisions about how to go forward. Sometimes we learn along the way that our plans aren't going to be what we thought they would be, but we're still glad that we made those courageous leaps, those courageous choices. When things somehow get so bad that the only choice is change, when the world is burning down around you, take to heart these words by David White. Above the mountains, the geese turn into the light again, painting their black silhouettes upon an open sky. Sometimes everything has to be inscribed across the heavens so you can find the one line already written inside you. Sometimes it takes a great sky to find that first bright and indescribable wedge of freedom in your own heart. Sometimes, with the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. You are not leaving. Even as the light fades quickly now, you are arriving. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, which is going to blow your minds, I promise. Number 1020, Whoa, Yeah, Yeah. It's in the small, soft cover hymnal. I'll close with the last few stanzas of the poem by David White, because it's always good to hear it again. Sometimes when the bones of the black sticks left when the fire has gone out, someone has written something new in the ashes of your life. You are not leaving. Even as the light fades quickly now, you are arriving. Amen. Blessed be. Go in peace. After this music.